Thank you all for attending the Discord AMA for Campaign Builder Castles and Crowns, the newest installment in the Campaign Builder series. As of right now, guys, just want to say thank you already. We funded in like 45 minutes or something like that. Absolutely insane. We're already at 90,000 and 1,200 backers. Not even the first day. So absolutely insane. Thank you guys so much. I think that some introductions are in order, of course. I'm Zach. I'll be your host for tonight. I am the community manager here at Kobold Press. But if you would so kindly introduce yourselves, Wolfgang, could you please go first?
Sure. I'm Wolfgang Bauer. I'm the founder here at Kobold Press. And if it's broken, it's probably my fault. I'll take the rep. That's okay. With me, though, is Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian Suskind. I'm one of the Kobold Press designers. And I've been here a long time. I mean, not in the chat. I just meant at Kobold Press.
Very wonderful, very wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
And yes, Brian is our resident mimic master. And today we'll be talking about Castles and Crowns. We'll be answering all of your guys' questions. We'll be sourcing questions from both chats, and we have some pre-selected ones. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start off with our first question here. Wolfgang and Brian, we would love to hear, in the first Campaign Builder series, Cities and Towns, it was very much a GM tool. One thing that Kobold Press has highlighted over the promotion for Castles and Crowns is the player options. We would love to hear what kind of player options are actually going to be available for players to bring to the table via Castles and Crowns.
All right, Brian, if you wrote them, you should talk about them. But otherwise, I can talk about them.
Yeah, I mean, I got to write some pretty cool stuff for this for players. I mean, we have sort of the maybe somewhat expected subclasses, and I kind of looked back at some of the classic tropes that you might find in cities and castles and crowns for inspiration. And I had the distinct honor, or if it makes it through editing, to write a jester subclass for the Bard, a College of Jesters. And the original jester, if anyone's old enough to remember it, was this sort of chaos monkey who, at a certain point along the line, could control a rod of wonder. And while I didn't add that specifically, though it is hinted, it does. It is a subclass based around the idea that humor and merriment gives you a certain amount of control over chaos. I'm pulling up my notes here because I'm old and have to remember these sort of things. But the cool thing about the Jester is not only does it have this sort of chaos control thing, I added something that I had fooled around with in my home game, and it was the idea that, much like sleight of hand, like a magician, a jester should be able to pull things out of pockets. Maybe things that shouldn't be able to fit into that pocket. I don't know, things like, a head of a red dragon, or a musical instrument, or a pie. Because, if you can't throw a pie in the face of an ogre, why are you playing this game?
Why are you playing a jester?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. I love that chaos trope of, it sounds practically Looney Tunesy, right? But if your table loves a lighter touch, I think having permission to be completely gonzo is a lot of fun. And if you don't want it at your table, right, you can just say no jesters.
Pick a different one. And so also there's a knight, which was actually a bit of a design challenge for me, because in Core 5e we already have the Cavalier and we have the Paladin, and you have a fighter. So I had to figure out where the niche was for a knight that wouldn't step on the other two. So I hearkened back to my study of Arthurian myth, and it really boils down to this whole theory of the knight's code and renown and how your dedication. And so it is the knight that we've designed is the kind of person who it pledges loyalty to a king or to a noble or to a patron. And that the strength of that oath or that pledge is the thing that empowers them. So they have it's a fighter archetype. So it's not super magical because I didn't want to step on the paladin. But it has a bunch of really pretty cool aspects to it. Yeah, and choices you could make along the way. Things like you can you could demoralize your foe in battle just by the power of your renown. And the more renown you have, the more powerful you are.
Oh my God, we've heard of you. We're afraid.
That's right. And the Black Knight always triumphs.
It's just a flesh wound. I will triumph.
Oh my gosh.
So I think there's at least, that's 2 of the 4 subclasses. We should save some for a future AMA, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
But I wanted to just say, I remember we came out of the Cities and Towns project saying, what if we did a little more for players? So I'm really happy that we're doing a little more for noble heroes, subclasses, backgrounds, heritage kind of things. There's a meteor section of Castles and Crowns devoted to player options. The other one that I proposed in the outline stage and I didn't get to write was Royal Magic. So nobles having some magic specific to them. And I don't know if that was you or Tim
It was. It was pretty cool because the orders that I got partially were like lean into curses. How do curses work in because a lot of fables and myths talk about these amazing curses that revolve around monarchs and everything from like Sleeping Beauty's castle, putting everybody to sleep. So what I did was I looked at rituals and especially how they work in Tales of the Valiant, because they're much more useful in the new rule set that we've come up with. And so I developed a series of curses that very nefarious people or people who really want to put it to the other guy can inflict upon their foes. Things like the curse of forgetting, where you could remove the memory of an individual, either specific memories or, if it's powerful enough, all of them. Things like the Liar's Curse, where things like the Liar's Curse, where the target is unable to tell the truth ever. And there's ways to remove the curse, and the way to remove the curse isn't like, just cast remove curse. That doesn't work. You have to fulfill the actual requirements of the curse first before you can just cast a spell to remove it. Because in all the myths,
I like the way.
Oh yeah,
right. The ritual magic part here, I think, is really appropriate for kingdom level magic. Like bigger, epicer, more permanent magics are part of this. I think there's other faster royal magic too, isn't there? Some stuff about assassination or
yes, there's definitely there's whole spells that deal with more kingdom level concerns, like sow field, like if you need, or accelerate harvest, or mass restoration. Things that you would want to do for your people at large versus just you. And of course, there's your requisite anti-assassin spells because you don't want to be knocked down while you're trying to do this. Indeed, there's also even part of Castles and Crowns is the idea of sieges, because sometimes, I don't know if you know this, but sometimes people try to attack you in your castle.
What? No.
Yes.
No, okay, not my castle.
Of course they do.
Well, not Zach's castle, but everybody else's castle. So
no one wants my castle.
I think the siege stuff, I mean, it's sort of the classic adventure, and we used to see these once in a while. I would get a pitch from somebody writing an adventure, and they'd say, I want to do a siege. And on the one hand, it's a great story point, but on the other hand, mechanically, you don't want to have to play through every guard rotation, every catapult and trebuchet shot. So, there has to be ways to abstract months of starvation down to something a little faster and more story driven.
There's they actually do it pretty well in some D&D video games, where you just like kind of running around the castle wall. You have to get from point A to B, but the siege is happening all around you, so things are exploding. But it's hard to sort of pull that off in a role-playing game unless you really prepared for it.
Yes, for sure, for sure.
Hey, we're wandering off on our own. Zach, have you got more questions for us?
I absolutely. Hey, honestly, I love hearing you guys just ramble on because you guys just bounce off each other so well. Let's go ahead. Let's take a bit of a bigger picture backwards about Castles and Crowns. One of the very, very cool things that Kobold Press has done in the past are fabled items. And they are not left untouched by Castles and Crowns. In the preview PDF, we show off the Crown of Griffins, and I would love to maybe talk a little bit about what Crowns of Legends are exactly and how they work in Castles and Crowns.
Well, they're right there in the free PDF, or at least some of them are, which is available for everybody, and I'm sure the download link is flying all around, not just on the Kickstarter, but here. The general rule on fabled items, they come from Vault of Magic, which was the Kobold Press hardcover expansion of the 5th edition D&D Magic rules to include, I think, 700 or 800 new items and tables that were integrated with the DMG tables, the core rule tables for 5th edition. So you could roll once and get a new item out of Vault of Magic, new item from the core rules. Then we added onto that fabled items which grow in power over time. And I think this was an idea from designer. Yeah, Mark Radel said, you know, if your +1 dagger is precious to you at first level, wouldn't it be cool if it grew into something more wonderful at higher levels? And so that's the core design trope. The Crowns of Legend take that same idea, like being a young prince, heir, something, and growing into a vast king, Kaiser, emperor type thing. I didn't write any of the crowns, so I don't know what the Griffin Crown does. I have to look it up. Darn it.
Yeah, so I have the preview PDF pulled up here, and we can actually talk about some of the things that it does. So the Crown of Griffin is basically it was forged personally by legendary smith Kelgror. The Crown of Griffins was an undesired gift at the end of the Nine Kingdoms War. The various involved rulers found an unsteady peace when relics of power were commissioned for each of them. So at 5th level, you have a heightened eyesight of a bird of prey, granting you proficiency in the perception skill, and if you do not have it, doubling your proficiency in the skill if you already do. Additionally, you possess the litheness of a cat. I hope I pronounced that word correctly, God. And then additionally, when you expend your full movement speed, any opportunity attacks targeting you are made with disadvantage. So I love how we're able to take this Crown of Griffins and implement these sorts of like animalistic capabilities into them. Do you know if there's similar capabilities across other Crowns of Legend within Castles and Crowns?
Well, I do.
I'd love to hear about it.
So yeah, you know, what's interesting about to me for Castles or for the fabled items, especially the crowns, is they're all it's such a thematic item. So, you know, there's a great one called Crown of Broken Blades, which, if you can imagine, looks like a crown that is literally fashioned from broken weaponry. And the primary ability of this crown is that you can basically use a bonus action to create a weapon that appears in your hand, and you instantly have proficiency with it. And as you gain levels, the weapon you summon gains greater and greater power until by the end, you're getting a +3 weapon that has charges that do various things, and it all emerges from the crown. It's almost like a crown of instant weaponry.
That's super cool. So it almost adds like this, what's the Pact of the Warlock, a Pact of the Blade Warlock sort of vibe, where you actually have like this weapon that is channeled through the crown. That is so cool.
And then we have.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
No, I mean, the problem with a king is you can't always be walking around with a great axe full of spikes, right? Like,
you can't. You sure? Armed. I like to.
Well, certain
how do you
kings,
hold your
maybe the
flagon
Art
of mead?
King. Yeah. I mean, stuff that comes out of a hidden pocket. I mean, it doesn't have to be jesters pulling red dragon heads out of their pockets all the time. Why can't the king or the count have that? So
Right.
having these magical crowns, I think, as objects of rule and power, it puts a nice spin on, and it's a category of magic items that at least I think is pretty underserved, right? Like there's 2 or 3 magic crowns in the base rules. They're not fabled items, so this is a big step up.
For sure. And, the Crowns of Legends are just one of the many unique things that are provided in Castles and Crowns. We have a question here from Tormented by Gnomes. If I'm a DM looking to get realms, armies, and the big picture going on in my campaign, there's a few different options out there. He lists some examples like MCDM's Kingdoms and Warfare or Legendary Games Kingdom System. How does the philosophy of Castles and Crowns differ from those products?
I think there's 2 things that we do that those products don't focus on as much. One of them is the player focus, I think, is a little stronger in Castles and Crowns. We've been talking about spells, subclasses, backgrounds, heritages, all those kinds of things. So Legendary Kingdoms, at least as I recall, is more about the GM side and kingdom management, and less about noble and royal characters like knights or courtly wizards. So that's one side, is the player focus, I think, is stronger in Castles and Crowns. If you're a player or if you want there to be cool, aristocratic, impoverished nobles, whatever kind of feudal, noble-themed campaign you're running, you have more player options. The other thing that we do that I don't remember them doing in the other products is we had this giant map folio with these huge deluxe wet dry erase maps, and of course they're in the VTTs in digital form too, but it's everything from the tilt yard for your knight to a multi-layered castle to monasteries, hunting lodges, palaces. Map folio for Castles and Crowns doesn't always get as much attention, but we've noticed they get a ton of play, and every time we, at least for cities and towns, the prior installment in the Campaign Builder series, every time we would take that to Gen Con, people are like, oh, I'll take that, please, because they're sort of general, useful fantasy environments, and our cartographer on those is just knocking it out of the park. So I think the big play spaces you plop down in front of your group actually add a lot, set the tone for a Castles and Crowns oriented campaign.
For sure. We've got another question here. We actually seen a couple variations of this question. I'm going to go ahead and mention 2 users I've seen say it. The Fallen Cleric of the Fleet and then 7th Mastery. Both questions have to do with the different kinds of magic within settings. 7th Mastery specifically references how older versions of tabletop books reference like realm magic, while Cleric more so references, what magic systems or how kingdoms themselves function around magic. How does Castles and Crowns address the sorts of magic within kingdoms?
Talked about it a little with royal magic, sort of that ritual that Brian was talking about.
Well, I think Richard,
I
think Richard with his stuff, the chapter that Richard Green wrote on kingdoms and rulers, he really goes into a lot of detail on different options when you're constructing your own kingdom to use in your game. Not to go back to the royal magic thing, but we use rituals in a lot of different ways to the way I look at rituals a lot of times is it isn't just cast the thing, make something explode, though you could. Rituals should really be vehicles for role playing. So we have things like the Trial of the Heir, which is a ritual that you undergo to prove that you are the rightful heir to the kingdom. and there's consequences for failing it. But it's it's all about and you have to undergo various challenges that test your aptitude and your right for the throne. And so you could almost design an entire night's game just around this one ritual. And so that's the sort of realm magic that we sort of played with, things that not only provide conflict but things that provide story and role playing at the same time.
We also focused in on NPCs to a high degree, right? Like there's a whole section on using clergy in a campaign as villains. What are their schemes? What are their goals? Are they low, medium, or high powered? Like, what are the hooks, right? Like, what would a clerical antagonist for a kingdom look like, and how might they operate? Or the same, frankly, for an arcane spellcaster, right? If you had some wizard or sorcerer that you want to use in that mode, there's a really nice breakdown of running 5 or 6 major types of antagonists and or spellcasters to run a courtly campaign around.
Very cool, very cool. So one thing that we briefly touched on was how high value and high quality the map folios are with our Campaign Builder series. You were right. They don't get a whole ton of attention, but when they do, people realize just how high quality they are and how amazing they are. One very cool thing that we do want to mention about this Kickstarter is that we actually are also featuring a lot of isometric maps. So if you are an isometric map fan, let me tell you, they are absolutely stunning and gorgeous. I remember when we were still, what was this, like Deep Magic era? And I remember opening up the Cities and Towns text channel in our Slack, and I think our art director had uploaded one of the isometric maps, thinking he was uploading it to the Castles and Crowns channel, and my jaw literally dropped, guys. There are so many cool variations and styles to the isometric map, so I think you guys will be excited for it. Speaking of variation, one thing that's mentioned in the preview PDF is the sample kingdoms. I would love to hear maybe what are some ideas that you guys think GMs and tables can take off of the sample kingdoms list, and how could they implement them into their tables?
Just one first thing to know about the sample kingdom. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot.
Yeah,
the first thing is they're not all human kingdoms, right? Like there's dwarven kingdoms, elven kingdoms, fey kingdoms, right? Like, yes, sure, there are human kingdoms as samples, but one of the nice things about Castles and Crowns is we're putting forward totally different lineages, right? A dwarven kingdom should look, feel, smell, map out, and operate differently than a human kingdom. And so we go into some detail on what that looks like. So that's one thing to take away from them. I think Richard wrote these, and he's not here to talk about them, but my memory of it is he created like 2 or 3 sample rulers for each of these different lineages. I remember, at least for the dwarves, because I'm obsessed with dwarves, like one ruler was Loki's son, and one was the Mother of Gold, and one was like a Law and Order type dwarf king, right? So they're,
oh my gosh.
right? Like, you can just from that short, like, what are they, right? The Mother of Gold, she's all about the mining. The Hammer of the Forge, the Justice one is like, oh, okay, well, this is a very orderly dwarf one. And Loki's son, well, that dwarf hall is messed up in ways that you might not expect walking in through sort of your standard gigantic hall gateway into the mountain, right? And they're a little bit plug and play, right? You could take noteworthy features from this dwarf kingdom, or you could say, I just want this ruler, or I just want these hooks, or these monsters that go with a dwarf kingdom, and put them in my dwarf kingdom, because they are sample kingdoms. You could plop them down whole cloth if you need a whole dwarf kingdom somewhere. You don't have to. Richard has done a really nice job sort of carving it into discrete blocks that are easy to slot into anyone's home campaign. A nice twist.
I will
Absolutely,
say that Richard's chapter was the first thing, like when I started working on mine, like the 2 chapters I was writing, his was already done. And so he's like, oh, here, look at this. And I'm like, damn it, Richard. Like, it's so good. And now I'm like, all right. And not that I wouldn't give 110%, but it's like, it's daunting when you get this amazing chapter and you're like, okay, well, I have to match that.
Right.
Well, I mean, hey, pressure makes diamonds, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've learned a little from Cities and Towns too, right? Like, this is Campaign Builder 2. We're trying to outdo ourselves from the first installment, but the first one was extremely popular and well received, and I love the fact that it's just being used in tables all over the place. I mean, it's full of monsters and NPCs and plots and maps, so yeah, of course, why wouldn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's a couple common questions actually related to the Kickstarter that I want to go ahead and make sure that we answer. Telema Onyx Thorn actually asked this question, and he said, sorry if this wasn't already asked, just showed up, but is there a reason that some VTTs are left out? Is this something that will continue going forward?
We are not supporting the Alchemy VTT at this point because Scarlet Citadel is the only title currently available on Alchemy, and we're still learning how to do stuff for the platform. Also, Alchemy is somewhat adventure-centric, is my impression, and there's no adventure in Castles and Crowns. It's all campaign building toolkit material. And the other one we're not supporting is Foundry. We are currently behind. We just finished updating all of our Foundry releases to the new platform version 11. So all of our back catalog is now functional in version 11. Yeah, I love that, but it meant we don't have enough Foundry developers to put absolutely everything on the schedule. And we said, well, do we want all our existing catalog to be functional, or do we want to do Castles and Crowns support for Foundry? And it's like, well, I think it's more important to get all the existing stuff up to snuff before they release V12, right? So breaks in the Foundry build are a real challenge for maintenance and support for us. And it makes it harder to plan around it. But the 2 that we are sort of deliberately looking at releasing further down the road, rather than swearing up and down it will be out on street date or, within 30 days of the hardcover street date. I don't think we can make that promise for Foundry and really keep it. So it would probably come trailing a few months after. And Alchemy is a different discussion. So yeah, we are going to support as many VTTs as we can, but some of it is picking the right things to support and putting our resources in to maintain the things we've already shipped.
Absolutely, yeah. And I do also want to say, that might feel like a Debbie Downer answer, guys, but there's no reason that it won't come later down the line, right? It's the fact that we want to make sure every product is up to snuff.
I want it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Let me be clear.
Who doesn't?
I want support for those other platforms, but I think it's unfair of us to say, yeah, you'll get it, and then ship it 6 months after everybody else gets theirs because we just don't have the staff, right?
So there's that moment where you go,
we're
going to do that, and then you look around and go, anybody know how to do that? And we all go,
We have people. They're all busy. It's a lot of work to get into the Foundry format. It's a little more challenging to convert for that platform than for some others.
For sure. And then another Kickstarter related question we had, which should just be a super easy answer, is that people were wondering, why can't we actually add the Campaign Builder Cities and Towns, Campaign Builder number 1, to our pledges on Kickstarter?
Oh, that's easy. It's super easy because it's already for sale. You can go to the Kobold Press store now and get it and not wait, months to have it show up with the rest of your rewards. We would be happy to ship it either in print or PDF or VTT format. The Cities and Towns Campaign Builder 1 installment is already available. And Kickstarter generally sort of frowns on selling old Kickstarter stuff on your new Kickstarter. I know many people do it. For a while they had a policy against it. But by and large, we're just like, no, get it now, get it shipped to you now. Don't wait months and months for it. If you live overseas and you're trying to save postage, like if you're, I don't know, in the UK somewhere, you might just try your friendly local game store, right? You just go there, pick it up, or ask them to special order it, and that way, you're not paying postage on it, and you're not waiting, 8 months for it to show up or something. So yeah, it just doesn't make sense logistically.
Absolutely, yeah. Totally makes sense. I definitely don't want to make anyone wait 6 months for a book that's already out, 6 months to a year. So one of the questions that we always ask with these AMAs is, being designers on this book, you guys, you get to put a lot of love into it. But sometimes books aren't like kids. We don't love them all equally, right? So we got to know, when it comes to Castles and Crowns, what is maybe a standout piece from the book that you got to touch, or just the part that you even got to write? What is your favorite part coming out of Castles and Crowns?
Ooh, well, I think for me, I think the one that was the part I liked the best was the one that was the biggest design challenge, because on my list of things was tiered backgrounds, which I said, "Oh, great! What are those?" And they said, "Well, you get to figure that out." And I went, "Oh, okay." And to me, what I eventually came up with was this idea that, you have your lineage and you have your heritages in especially in Tales of the Valiant, but sometimes your character, as they go through a campaign, will get other jobs. Like you might be appointed as an ambassador, or you might end up getting, made a courtier on a throne, or you might pick up these other jobs, and there's not a lot of rules for that, and you don't get really any kind of benefit for it. So I thought, what if we design something that I was sort of calling a character thread? You pick it up through the context of the game, and it has a definitive goal. And as you work toward that goal, your GM has various ways with the rules that we created to give you these milestones that you hit. And as you go, you actually gain tier benefits. And once you get to the end of your goal, it just either goes away or you pick up a new one. And some of the things like, for example, the diplomat, I actually created a diplomatic immunity feature based on, the severity of the crime you're accused of and your reputation as ambassador. And, and the relation of your country with the country that you're being ambassador for. And it could get you out of trouble, or maybe into trouble, depending on really how that goes.
Probably into trouble.
Probably. And so it's, they're almost like mini character classes that you're picking up for just a limited scope. And I had great fun writing those.
Super wonderful, super wonderful. Wolfgang, what was your favorite part of Castles and Crowns?
Well, I wrote less of it. The sample kingdom I wrote hasn't been announced yet, so I'm going to leave that alone. But in terms of outlining and sort of the concepting stage where I was more deeply involved, I gotta say, defining castles, mapping castles, making castles a center of adventure and play just makes me really happy. I think that there are, wonderful environments, partly because through the weight of authority or force or just how many guards there are, right? It's a great place to mush together rivals, villains, intrigues, stealth adventures. Like, it's a place that kind of can do combat, warfare, and sieges. But what castles are coolest at for me is forcing player characters to be polite to people they normally wouldn't be polite to, right? So when the evil ambassador shows up, or the orcish warlord comes in to negotiate, or something else, you can have some wonderful role-playing opportunities in castles because of the weight of some ruler's displeasure if you violate the peace, right? Like if you go into some noble's castle and leave it covered in blood, think you've left the realm of a kingdom campaign and you've entered the realm of an outlaw campaign, which, is a lot of fun, but, noble knight on the run in the woodlands eating worms is not the same as noble knight champion at the joust, hero at the royal ball. So, I don't know. I think it's just a fun environment that doesn't get as much playtime as dungeons, villages, volcanoes, whatever. And you may have noticed in my own adventure design stuff like, I don't know, Court of the Shadow Fae or Wrath of the River King. I love throwing in high-powered noble stuff, and castles of various kinds. We also talk about, there's a whole section on strongholds, monasteries, like military bases, manor houses, palaces. Anything that comes with the upper crust might have a map, but it certainly has some description and examples. So it's kind of an easy plop down in front of your group. Hey, here's a manor house, and this one's got a dwarven spin. Let's go to town with this for tonight's adventure.
Absolutely.
For me, the best part of that kind of stuff is that, players tend to get a little, what's the word? Cocky about themselves as they play, because their characters, you're taking down dragons and you're, defeating all these monsters, and then you meet some king and you're like, oh, this is just a guy. Or you meet some,
Sure.
and you're like, why do I have to listen to this person? But the great thing about this sort of a book is it sort of teaches you that there's consequences for defying them or for not treating them with the respect they think they deserve. And that's the fun of the game right there.
There's story and conflict written all over it, especially with those characters who don't have respect for any of that. So fun campaign.
Yeah, I really do love how both the things you guys talked about, the tiered backgrounds, this growth of a character, and then also the many different ways that we can bring nobility and bring that political intrigue into a campaign. It's really an experience that not a whole lot of players get to experience, mainly because there's very little writing on how to actually do it and how to give that to your players. So that's probably what's most exciting for me is the increase in political intrigue at the table.
There's a lot of that.
Yes. We do have a question from Ariamus. Thank you so much, by the way, for putting down how to pronounce your name. You do not understand how much I value that. But they said, you mentioned VTTs, but can you talk about your plans specifically for Castles and Crowns, but also more generally about your new partnership with Demiplane that was announced today?
Well, it was just announced, so there isn't much beyond the announcement. We're very excited to be working with Demiplane, who have been just killing it with Pathfinder support, and who, the team over there is very experienced in VTTs, has launched some great tech, and is challenging us with Tales of the Valiant. Come forward and work with them on technically how are we gonna build out a system that's super smooth, super great, easy to use, and fun for everyone at the table, and character centric. So I look forward to seeing how that's going to play out. But at the moment, our plan is, because Castles and Crowns will have full Tales of the Valiant support, it will appear in places like Demiplane as well as places like Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds or Shard. And we're just going to keep working with that group as long as people like the format. I think they're going to do really well. Demiplane's track record is great, and they seem super excited to take on TOV as a rule set and as an open gaming environment. So yeah, that's where we're headed. Come along with us and see where they take it. But I have hugely high expectations of that group because of their track record.
Yeah, they're a bit just a little legendary. You know, they got a little bit of a story.
A little bit.
just a little bit.
They're smarter about this stuff than we are, right? We're paper and pencil kobolds, a lot of us, and so we trust them to do it right, and they're just showing up and saying, "Here's what we need."
Yeah.
No, it's been an exciting conversation.
For sure. We're gonna take a bit of a twist here, go back to the Kickstarter, talk about pricing a little bit. Bonker talked about the pricing for the bundle of the PDF hardcover and a VTT license being right around $90, and them feeling that being a little bit steep. Do you care to talk about a bit of our price breakdown, Wolfgang?
Sure. Yeah, no, the best price, the best bargain right there is $99 for the hardcover book, the map folio, the PDF of the hardcover, the JPEG map pack. I think it's about a $60 discount off of retail, or maybe, yeah, somewhere in that ballpark. So the Kickstarter is heavily discounted. The VTT support we did for cities and towns was a once over lightly support where we priced it at something like $20 for all the maps and all the monster NPC character tokens and stats, right? So it was sort of stripped down maps and creatures with associated stats, but it wasn't the rest of the book. And we tried that model with VTTs that we offered for cities and towns, all those platforms. And what happened was everyone said, well, the maps and monsters are great, and you know, $19-20 is a good price. But we want the rest of the book on our VTT as well. All the tables, all the player options integrated, all the rest of it. And we realized that with Castles and Crowns having a shift toward more character options, we were going to have to do both more programming and more support for a full-fledged VTT item, right? Which unfortunately means we got to pay our software people, our QA people, and our partners more to get that built, right? Putting out maps and monster tokens is relatively straightforward. Programming for the Roll20, you know, compendium is much more rigorous, takes weeks or months longer. And so we pretty much have to put it at the price point we did, which is, I believe, $39 for the full map folio pack, all the monster character options, and the full content of the hardcover book in VTT format. So this is a change, right? People said the stripped down version wasn't enough. And so now we're investing more money in a full-fledged conversion, which, I don't know, if you find value in it, fantastic. If you think it's too high priced, you know, we may see less people adopting the VTT format for this project. But that's kind of the reality for us, is if we're going to offer the full book, we got to pay for the conversion. And there's just no way around it. Yeah, I think it's a good deal. I think the $99 pack in particular, which is print, PDF, JPEG, maps, and hardcover, it's just a lot less than you'd pay at retail. So we try to make sure the Kickstarters have value. Ultimately, it's up to each individual backer to decide, yeah, I'm in, or no, you know, it's too much. I'm just going to get this other part over here. ETTs in particular have been really interesting. The other thing that's going on, to take a step back from the pure conversion costs, is we are seeing more and more people go back to their physical tabletops, print books, actual dice, playing at home. And we've seen a decline in VTT sales since the pandemic has ebbed. And what that means for us is We know there are less sales in the VTT slice of the pie and more sales in the print slice of the pie. And unfortunately, that also means pricing for VTTs needs to reflect a smaller audience supporting those software devs.
Yeah, for
See
sure.
if that trend continues.
And something I do also want to point out, I just opened up my Cities and Towns book, right? I have it right here behind me on my bookshelf. And, you know, Brian briefly touched on having over 50 pages of player options. And I want to put it in perspective. Yeah. That's 50 pages of player options on top of, I just opened up Cities and Towns, sorry. And it has over 250 pages of GM tool work, right? That's 250 pages of maps, lore, name tables, basically everything I need to build out a very, very deluxe and intricate city or settlement. So, you know, these aren't like 100, 150 pages. These are like full on, like on top of the map folio, like you're looking at like 300 pages almost. So it's a lot.
Other writers on Castles and Crowns. I was just commenting on the stuff I happen to be looking at right now that I had handed in. You know, Richard's chapter alone is worth. I mean, I would buy that as an individual book because it's just that in depth.
People can make their own decisions about this, right? Like, and if you find that the value in the print and PDF is so high, you prefer it in that format, that's great. But we're going to offer it in VTT so long as the numbers pencil out, and so far they do.
Yeah,
it's good content, and there's a lot of it. You're right, Zach. It's 288. It's close to 300 pages.
Yeah. And then actually, I want to take a bit of a rewind here. We've talked about chapter 1. We've talked about noble heroes, the College of Jest Bard. We talked about the Knight Discipline Fighter. We've talked a lot about chapter 3, sites and settings, the castles, the strongholds, the monasteries, and then we even got to touch on chapters 4 and 5, royal magic and kingdoms and rulers. I want to rewind though to the introduction. Right. So the introduction actually touches on the rulers and the ruled. Right. So we titled this book Castles and Crowns. But something I really like is that right from the jump of the book, you get to read about wealth, wars, troubles. I would love to hear I would love to hear you guys talk about from this book, like what are the different perspectives at which players can play and GMs can create campaigns about people who are on either side of the coin when it comes to the hierarchy.
It's a juicy topic, right? Yeah, some of it's about power and rulership and or fighting against the powers and rulership. The joy of that introduction is it kind of lays out for you, like, what do you want out of a kingdom level campaign? And I go back sometimes to thinking about the stuff that happened 15 years ago, like when I worked on Birthright, right? Like all those kingdoms had resources, they had very distinctive rulers. It was all about fighting other kingdoms and seizing magical power, other levers of power. That's possible here with, right? Like a high magic campaign is definitely something Castles and Crowns supports, but there's also room for sort of a lower level, lower magic, slightly grittier campaign play style. And that introduction is all about asking the questions that help you as a game master or your group in a session 0 figure out what kind of kingdom campaign you want, right? Do you want to be Robin Hood? Do you want to be King Arthur? Want it to be elves versus dwarves? Like, at what level of kingdom play are you all going to be happiest? So I think there's stuff to do in that early character generation stage. Can set the tone for your whole campaign, and the introduction is about teasing that out.
Well, and there's also the aspect too of a lot of people think about kingdoms or castles and courtly life, but they don't really they don't necessarily know all the ins and outs. And I think that introduction chapter sort of lays out that feeling, the feeling that characters should get when they walk into those situations. Like, this is not walking into a tavern. or walking into a dungeon. There are other things at play. These spheres of power that you're going to be walking into. It's almost a whole social game that's happening, and that tone is something that I think is touched on in a lot of different ways in the various chapters.
Absolutely, yeah. I love that. I love how Wolfgang talked about how, from the jump of this book, it really allows you to take that essence of the royal, the courtly life and implement it before you even sit down at the table for the first time, right? I just think that that's so cool. Now, we do have a little over 5 minutes left. I wanted to end on a bit of a heavy hitter here, Wolfgang. I would love for us to talk about the first stretch goal that we unlocked, the follow-up to the Cities and Towns character sheet, the Kingdom character sheet. I would love to discuss that. Could you please?
Yes. It was one of the things that made Cities and Towns a standout project, was the ability to track the growth of your village, town, city, the people in it, its resources, etc. And when it came time to talk about Campaign Builder 2 and Castles and Crowns, the argument was, do we want a kingdom level sheet or a fiefdom feudal level sheet that talks about what does the king command, what does this ruler command, who are the players, and what's going on. And it is sort of a leveled up version of Cities and Towns, but it goes in a couple of different directions too. I don't know, do we have a copy I could share here? It's going to be available to backers sometime by the end of this week, I want to say. The graphics people have been going nuts on the first pass of the Kingdom character sheet. And
do you want it?
I found it already. Have you got it?
I can take a screenshot for you if you'd like me to. Or if you just want the PDF, I can send that as well.
Let's share it here.
And Wolfgang, have you noticed that Zach? Have you noticed that Zach seems to have a lot more stuff than we do? Little suspicious.
I know, right? Like, I saw it. I was asked to provide feedback. Like, a bunch of designers talked about it in the Discord. The nice thing about the Kingdom character sheet is it's already been beat up on by the game designers on this project, the editors, the layout people, our editorial director weighed in. Everybody who loved the Cities and Town sheet had an opinion. Like, the whole internal staff, we all love the Cities and Town character sheet. So,
yeah, well, here, I'll drop it. I'll drop it in both chats here. Let's just go ahead and just drop it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's uploading to your it's uploading to your DMs right now, Wolfgang.
Screenshot, eh?
No, actually, here. There you go.
Oh, cool. Oh, awesome.
It just takes a second. It's processing.
Oh, there it is.
There you guys go. First look.
Oh, gosh, processing. Yay! I don't think that's the... Yes, but that is very close to the final, if not the current status, right? So it shows you kind of what we're thinking. And it's just a darn useful tool. And, like, we wanted it basically for any campaign, right? Like, it's aimed at 5th edition D&D. It's aimed at Tales of the Valiant. But if you're using Pathfinder or RuneQuest, you're still going to get something out of this sort of tracking. And any GM's notebook, hard drive, tool set is going to be able to organize kingdoms in a more interesting way. Brian, were you part of that discussion on Discord? I can't remember.
Yeah, I was part of it. I think the parts that I was really happy to see in here were sort of the as usual, but for me it's the more role playing stuff, like the ideals of the individual lands, the fact that the king has the blocks for the important personages has the little quirks, mannerism, interests, passions, flaws, secrets aspect, because that's, for me, that's always the stuff that I write down for my NPCs. Like, what's the thing that the players are going to remember the most about this character? And it tends to be those little details. And I was especially happy to see it on here. And it's just pretty.
It is.
Yeah. I'm in love with it.
I mean, that's part of the appeal. It's a prettier thing than my yellow legal pad scrawled notes. It forces me to be organized. Be form fillable in the final version. Of course, we'll take tweaks and suggestions if you've got them before it hits print. But you don't have to wait, right? You can back this thing now. You can download it and use it in your campaign next week.
Yeah,
it's just that useful.
So cool. We've got a couple minutes here left. I'm going to ask one final question before we wrap up here. And this is actually a really useful question as we are making our company transition into TOV, Wolfgang. Will the monster stat blocks be using the TOV format or the traditional 5e format?
Our plan for this one is, because it's sort of forward compatible, is just to do TOV stat blocks. I don't think any 5th edition D&D player is going to have a hard time figuring out what armor class, hit points, and actions mean, right? So the word from the editorial team I've gotten is we're just doing TOV stat blocks, but nobody is going to have any trouble if you're sticking with 5th edition D&D for now. And you're waiting for Tales of the Valiant to release next year. It's fine. It's still totally usable, right? You're not gonna stumble over it.
The monsters I wrote were in TOV format, and other than a couple of little things, they're almost identical to the 5e. So yeah, I mean, I don't think you'll have any problem using it in just 5e.
Well, there you have it, folks.
So it's meant to please both audiences. Yeah. It's really highly compatible, and that's why I think it's described that way on the Kickstarter page. Like 4 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, 4 Tales of the Valiant. It's one book, but it works either way.
But it's better.
It's bigger. It's better. It's badder. It's castles and crowns.
Thank you for saying it, Brian. It is. It is good. Yes.
I mean, I alone just had a lovely time assigning magic item prices again. It made me very happy.
Yes. It's one of the things for TOV that has gotten just a hugely positive response. And I'm like, did anybody really miss it? And like the crowd's going, yes, give us magic item pricing.
Well, because you give your players all this gold and they go, yeah. I mean, what are they going to spend it on? They want to buy items.
Yeah. Everyone loves that like filler episode where the characters just go shopping.
Yeah, shopping episode.
See, but even in Castles and Crowns, the money won't help you, Brian. Like, you may want to buy a crown, but you can't. You have to seize the throne, and then someone will make you the crown.
With enough gold in your pocket, you can buy a pocket mangonel. So, I mean, maybe that would help you get the crown.
Right. It's like you can't buy happiness, but you can buy things adjacent to happiness.
Like siege weaponry.
Siege weaponry makes me happy. I don't know about you.
Yeah. I mean...
thank you, Tormented by
That wall knows what it did.
Mm-hmm. It does. Take it down. All right, we're getting even sillier than usual.
I know. I love this.
Yes, we didn't get to talk sieges very much.
Yes, we will. Well, maybe we can talk about that in the design seminar once we unlock it.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, we will get there.
We will.
We'll get a little crunchier in the design seminar, but that's probably next week or tomorrow. I don't know how soon we're unlocking that one.
Yeah, we'll see.
Soon.
I bet you it's this week. Alrighty, folks. This has been an absolute blast. Thank y'all so much for coming out. We will be uploading this to YouTube. So if you guys, had to jump out at any point, or if you have a friend who couldn't make it, fear not. We have it recording and it will be up on YouTube soon. Just stay tuned to the Discord and stay tuned to our social media for when that goes live. I'm Zach. I've been your host. I've been joined by Wolfgang Bauer, Kobold in Chief, and Brian Suskind, Mimic Master and designer for Kobold Press. And thank you so much.